Hey guys, welcome to our short video about naming rights 101. We're going to give you a brief overview of what naming rights is. This is brought to you by Audrey, Catherine, and Madison.
In the most basic definition, naming rights is a financial transaction and form of advertising whereby a corporation or other entity purchases the right to name a facility or event, typically for a defined period of time. For properties like a multi-purpose arena, performing arts venue, or an athletic field, the term ranges from 3 to 20 years.
The corporate naming rights of a major sports facility is a relatively new concept. However, in 1926, the Chicago Cubs Wrigley Field was the first, I would say, official stadium to be named after something. However, it was not named after the corporation, the Wrigley's Chewing Gum Company. It was actually named after the team's owner. And there was no financial transaction or no payments for the naming rights that were made. The stadium itself was just named after the team's owner. In 1956, a similar situation took place with the St. Louis Cardinals. At the time, they were owned by the Anheuser-Busch Company, and the stadium that they were in was named the Busch Memorial Stadium after the owner of the team. So once again, this is similar to the Cubs, where there was really no naming rights situation that occurred, just the team being named after its current owner. So it was not until 1971 where we actually saw the very first naming rights agreement take place. Here, the Schaefer Brewing Company bought the naming rights to the Boston Patriots, and the brewing company bought the naming rights for $150,000, and it was to rename the Boston Patriots Stadium as the Schaefer Field.
Throughout the 1970s to the beginning of the 1990s, few sport facilities were corporately named. However, during 1995, the financial magnitude grew substantially, and by 1997, 1/3 of venues in Major League sports were named after corporations. Currently, there are 77% that are corporately named. Corporations quickly realized the growth in entitlement opportunities and how to utilize naming rights agreements to help build their economic and social capital. Because of this, there has been a substantial increase in the amounts paid for naming rights. Here are examples of the first few companies to agree to substantial naming right agreements. In 1998, Staples paid $100 million for naming rights on the popular arena located in downtown Los Angeles. 2 years later, Reliant Energy purchased the naming rights to the Houston Texans' new football stadium for $10 million a year. The Cowboys are one example of how both the stadiums and companies recognize the significant benefits of a naming rights agreement. It took 4 years in order for an agreement to be reached with AT&T, who now pays $19 million annually until 2022. College stadiums differ from Major League naming rights. In general, they are modest in comparison to Major League naming rights. Unlike Major League stadiums, college stadiums are not named after corporations, but rather donors. But that changed in 2015, where we now see a rise in naming college stadiums after corporations. The University of Kentucky is a prime example, as they made an agreement with Kroger, who pays $1.85 million per year. High school naming rights are by far the least significant in terms of their monetary value. Much like colleges, they are named after a prominent local resident. The only relevant example of high school naming rights is in Midland, Texas, where the high school partnered with Grande Communications, who will pay $1.2 million over the next 20 years. There are three fundamental reasons why companies buy naming rights. The first of which is exposure. You can't bypass the name of a stadium the way you can fast forward through a commercial. Naming rights offers a unique 24/7 exposure. The second is desire to increase company sales. The rights fee is often largely based on companies' estimate of the amount of incremental sales benefits. The final benefit is entertainment opportunity. Companies are granted access to luxury suites and indirect selling opportunities by hosting clients and customers. There are 7 key elements of naming rights. 1. The term or length of contract. 2. Consideration, amount and schedule of payments. 3. Signage rights and limitations, such as number, size, placement, and types of signs and design approval process. 4. Installation costs, responsibility for expenses related to preparation, installation, and maintenance of signage. 5. Marketing rights, number and location of luxury suites, boxes, club seats, and on-site exhibit space, ATMs, etc. 6. Termination upon default, provision to terminate contract if either party fails to perform obligations of the agreement with no more than 90 days notice. 7. Reimbursement, naming sponsor compensation in event of incomplete season due to strike, lockout, or weather. 8. Renewal option, current sponsor given first right of refusal to extend agreement, generally 30 days to 6 months prior to expiration of contract.
Now we're going to move into the core part of our presentation, which is about the price variation of naming rights deals. Before we begin, we're going to introduce the topic and go over a few of the factors that both teams and stadiums consider when determining the price of a naming rights deal. The size of the market is the first factor that is considered in determining the value of the naming rights deals. Franchises that are located in large metroplex areas tend to have a higher price and value on the rights to name their stadiums. The thought process behind this is that teams and corporations value the increased exposure the brand or company would receive given the influx of people not only into the stadium, but also within the surrounding area of the stadium. Next, the year that the stadium is built tends to add more value to the naming rights deal. A brand new stadium will attract more buzz, so to speak. Therefore, sponsors are more likely to pay more for the naming rights to a newer stadium because of the exposure that would be generated through the media hype. The age of the stadium upon the naming of it is also something to be considered. There can be a higher premium paid for being coined as the original name of the stadium. If there are multiple teams playing within the same stadium, this can increase the value of the naming rights deal. Sponsors are more likely to pay more for naming rights deals if there is more exposure opportunities for their brand or company. The thinking is that if there are multiple teams in the same city, in the same arena, then there are more games for fans to attend in the same place, hence the increase of the naming rights value. The prestige of a franchise is another factor that weighs in on the price of a naming rights deal. Here, a team such as the Cowboys, who were founded in 1960, could be considered a more well-established and more prestigious franchise than the Texans, who were founded in 2002. This could potentially add to the price tag of the naming rights deals, hence what influenced the variation in price of the naming rights deals that happen for different teams in different stadiums.
Lastly, the amount of championships that a team has can also influence the price of a naming rights deal. A more successful team is way more intriguing to a potential sponsor because of the consistent media exposure that would be revolving around both the team and the stadium. Thanks for listening, guys. Now we are going to go into the last half of our presentation and talk a little bit more about price variation and naming rights and go into a little bit more depth on a couple of the topics.